Welcome, guys. You're watching UFC betting prediction channel, and today we'll be talking about the Saturday's card between Night-Overeem and Augusto Sakai. We'll only be analyzing the fights on the main card. So there's our five fights, and this time the fights are really, really close. And I'll just touch upon the last time around where one of the fights on the main card was canceled between Kutelaba and Ankalaev. But apart from that, all of the other predictions and the way the fights ended came out to be true. So I'm really pumped. I was able to make good money on the last card. So anyways, let's dive into this main card. So the first fight on the card is between Jalen Turner and Thiago Moises. Now, talking about Turner, so Turner's a really, really tall guy for lightweight, standing at 6 feet 3 and has a 75-inch reach. He debuted on a short notice fight against Vicente Luque at welterweight, but since has moved to lightweight. He was extremely calm in his debut, which is a huge advantage in my opinion. The ability to hit precisely, repeatedly, probably depends the most on being calm and choosing your strikes correctly. He's a Muay Thai guy who utilizes his reach really well. Both of his hands have power, and he's showed that in his fight against Callum Potter and to some extent against Matt Frevola, where he rocked him multiple times. Then Jalen Turner has great knees and he throws them up the middle. He ended up hitting Frevola in the beginning of the round, but abandoned the technique going forward. He probably would be wary of using kicks and knees against Moises due to the takedown scare. Jalen's takedown defense is questionable, and Matt Frevola was able to take Jalen's back fairly early in the first. If Moises takes Jalen's back, he is going to be in the world of trouble. Now coming to Moises. So Moises is 5'9" and probably a little undersized for lightweight division, especially against Jalen Turner. He fights in the orthodox stance and has a really good body kick. His jiu-jitsu credentials are stellar. He fires submissions from bottom and from the top. Moises also likes to pull guard with a guillotine, but when that doesn't work out, like in the case with Beneil Dariush, he loses position. Um, and that might be something that he wouldn't want to do against Jalen Turner. Moises' wrestling looked somewhat deficient against Beneil Dariush, but remember, Dariush has a stellar ground game, great jiu-jitsu and wrestling credentials. However, with Holloway, the timing of his takedown was perfect, and so was the execution. Moises has a good hook and can throw a mean spinning back kick. He has a good timing on his strikes, and the output is probably on the lower side. Moises has a good top game and good ground and pound, and he displayed it against his fight with Kurt Holloway. Moises has great transition from single leg to double leg, and which I think will be key in fight against Jalen Turner. Moises has good leg kicks, teep kicks, and his pace is quite lively. Moises tried some submissions right from the start, but was pushed and controlled against the cage in some of his fights. Moises also got knocked down in the first round of his fight against Damir Ismagulov. And Ismagulov put in a pace on Moises where he looked a little flat in the third and lost a clear unanimous decision. In his final fight prior to this fight against Jalen Turner, Moises looked like a completely lost fighter in the first round with Michael Johnson. He was completely clueless about how to counter him, but in the second round, he pulled guard on Johnson in a scramble and won the fight through a leg lock right in the beginning of the second round, which was unexpected. Now, as I mentioned, this is an extremely hard fight for pre-fight betting. Jalen is calm, cool, and collected, who has now spent time under Jason Perillo and will be coming in with a smart strategy. Moises, on the other hand, trains at ADT and needs only one takedown to finish the fight with leg locks, chokes, or arm bars. Moises has good cardio, but does not even come close to Matt Fravola's, who was able to out-hustle Turner with takedowns and strikes even after getting stung multiple times. Moises had good striking, but it looked very ordinary against Johnson and Ismagulov. As I said, he only needs one opportunity to end the night for Jalen, and Jalen has shown a definite hole in his takedown defense. So I see this fight as a 55-45 for Moises. However, the odds for Moises are between -180 to -200, which in my opinion are way too deep. It translates to a probability of around 65 to 67% for Moises. And I think he does not have enough value on to justify this bet. The next fight is between Carol Rosa versus vsjara Eubanks. So first on Carol Rosa. Carol Rosa fights in orthodox stance, and she stands up very tall and upright in her fighting stance. She likes to utilize long straight punches and kicks to fight from a distance. She doesn't necessarily move her head too much when she's punching in the pocket. And when she gets hit in close quarters, her immediate reaction is to bite down on a mouthpiece and throw back at the opponent instead of running for cover. Rosa can take a punch and has a solid chin. Rosa had her last two losses on the ground through submission, even though they were a few fights ago. In her last defeat, she was submitted by Melissa Gatto outside of the UFC when Rosa was on top of her. Grappling is probably the weakest link in her arsenal, and in the UFC, she's shown good fight IQ for most part, and she does not go down on the ground even when she had her opponent hurt in Procopio. She did take her last opponent in the UFC down and controlled her and did a fair bit of damage there. Rosa throws a lot of kicks, both inside and outside. And I should say leg kicks. However, I notice that she does not throw as many outside leg kicks if she feels a threat of a takedown, like in a fight with Procopio, and which might be the case with vsjara Eubank. Rosa throws nice elbows in the clinch and has a good sprawl and takedown defense. Her main training partner is Jessica Andrade, who's been the strawweight champion and who should be able to provide her with good ground practice to be ready for this fight. Rosa makes good takedown entries and has a decent level double leg herself, but we haven't seen anything spectacular on the ground so far in the UFC. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she does not have it. Based on my memory before watching the tape, I thought that Eubanks might have the edge in striking, but based on Rosa's last fight with Melo, her striking looks much improved, and with the height advantage on Rosa's side and a higher punch count, I definitely see striking advantage for Rosa in the second and the third round. Now going to vsjara Eubanks. Eubanks is 35 years old and 10 years older of her opponent Rosa. Even though Rosa has had 16 pro fights as compared to Eubanks' 10, the level of competition that Eubanks has faced is way higher than Rosa's. She's faced Aspen Ladd twice, Roxanne Modafferi twice, Caitlin Chokagian, Betsy Correa, Lauren Murphy, and the list goes on. Eubanks comes out fast and throws crisp and fast combinations. And she won't hesitate to go down for a takedown often and early. Even though her striking looks really good, especially in the first of her fights, her bread and butter is grappling, and she's expected to have a fair bit of advantage in the grappling exchanges. She has a well-disguised and well-timed takedown that will be the key in this fight with Rosa. Eubanks almost always wins the first round, even coming close to finishing Correa and Ladd. but then she starts to get gassed, her output declines, and she's prone to concede decisions then. Eubanks fights in orthodox stance and puts a lot of weight on her front leg, making her open to low leg kicks that Carol throws really well. Eubanks' biggest weakness is her cardio. She looked tired in the third round with Murphy and looked fairly exhausted in the second round against Modafferi. It could be attributed to a brutal weight cut for her fight in the flyweight, but things have been pretty similar in bantamweight too. Eubanks' boxing looked really sharp with Pereira as well in the first round, but Pereira came back in the second and outstruck Eubanks. The same thing happened with Aspen Ladd, where she was outgrappled in the second and then beaten up in the third. So, just summarizing here, off of my memory, I thought this should be an easy one for Eubanks, but after watching the tape, it seems to me that it'll be much closer. Eubanks comes out guns blazing and pretty much wins every first round of her fight, even the ones that she's lost by decision. Eubanks is great on the ground and throws fast combos to set up her takedowns. However, her output declines a fair bit thereafter. Rosa, on the other hand, has faced much inferior competition, so it's hard to gauge her ceiling. She throws double the amount of strikes that Eubank does every minute. If Rosa makes it out without taking much damage in the first, I see this fight going for Rosa based on her high output. Can Eubanks finish Rosa? Probably, but I'd say very unlikely. I see this fight going to a decision with Rosa winning it 29-28. Oh, this is the fun one. Next fight is between Mitchell Pereira and Zelim Imadaev. And whenever Pereira is involved in a fight, it's usually extremely interesting. There is no shortage of action in the fight. So Pereira has seen pretty crazy highs and lows in his career in the UFC, considering that he has only had 3 fights with the company so far. He knocked out Danny Roberts in his debut within the first 2 minutes, who happens to be the same guy who knocked out Imadaev in his last fight. We are not going to get into MMA math, but there's definitely something to make a small note of. Pereira's problem is his consistency, energy management, and fight IQ. After a great debut, he did so much acrobatics trying to please the audiences that he tired himself within the first round and then lost a decision to a guy who was fighting on a 5-day notice and stepping up a weight class. Then, after dominating Diego Sanchez in his third fight, who was doing his own bizarre things in the cage himself, Pereira landed an illegal knee and lost due to disqualification. Now, let's talk about Pereira's athleticism, because, in my opinion, he's probably the most gifted athlete with the ease and fluidity of movement that is matched by no one else. He leaps out of nowhere, and the closest athlete in a similar way I can think of is Yoel Romero. Pereira can knock anyone out. Make no mistake, his power and explosiveness can surprise anyone. And don't forget, you get knocked out with what you don't see coming. The faster and explosive you are, everything else equal, more often than not that you're going to get the knockout. Pereira showed better energy management against his fight with Diego Sanchez, but Diego wasn't like his old self who pressures constantly. Diego chose to sit back and not pressure Pereira. And that was primarily the reason why I think Pereira dominated. With his second fight with Tristan Connolly, Connolly was able to pressure Pereira even at being disadvantaged in the size and athleticism department. With that kind of athleticism and the extra cool stuff that he does, he is prone to gassing out. And I think Zelim can take advantage of that. Now, talking about Imadaev, um, Imadaev is coming into this fight having lost his first two fights in the UFC, and they happen to be the only losses in his career. He has finished all the fights before his last two losses, and that could shatter an undefeated fighter's confidence, especially the way he lost his last fight with a vicious knockout. Imadaev has good striking, but Max Griffin in his first fight gave a blueprint to beating Imadaev, which is wrestling him first to take the snap out of Imadaev's strikes. However, this can be really tiring considering Pereira's cardio issues and Imadaev's decent grappling defense. Imadaev has a tendency of falling over when he throws his strikes. Although he might look lazy while throwing those, make no mistake, he's got power. He constantly utilizes spinning back fist and spinning kicks, and sometimes a little too much, being pretty predictable. So he would want to keep it down and use it as a surprise weapon rather than using it all the time. The most important asset that Imadaev has is his cardio. Even after significant grappling exchanges, he came on strong in the third round against Max Griffin, which I thought was a draw at best after the point deduction that Imadaev had to take through. So, in summary, it is a pick and fight. It all comes down to the fact whether Pereira will be able to land a clean shot on Imadaev. If he does, he has the power and skill to finish a dazed Imadaev. If not, Imadaev's pressuring style is perfect as an opponent who'd sap Pereira's gas tank. In totality, how I see this fight going is Pereira coming out fast, hurting Imadaev a little bit, Imadaev relying on his chin, and then coming back to win a close decision. Now for the co-main event, and this event was probably moved a couple of weeks ahead due to OSP contracting COVID. So the next fight is between OSP and Alonzo Menifield. Alonzo Menifield is coming into this fight after his first professional MMA loss that highlighted a huge hole in his arsenal. Menifield wasn't able to finish Devin Clark early and then got dragged in a long decision where Menifield was only a shell of himself. Menifield throws super hard. He touches people and their lights go out real quick. He knocked out Paul Craig and Vinicius Moreira within the first round. But with that extremely muscular build combined with the way he throws full power into every strike, he's prone to gassing out. Menifield seems to be really adept at capitalizing on his opponent's mistake. So both in the above-mentioned knockouts, his opponents tried to throw a spinning attack and missed badly, and the rest is history. Menifield has got really good takedown defense, but that saps his energy. He has shown very decent defense against good wrestlers such as Devin Clark. And he only conceded the takedowns when the takedowns were chained and when Menifield was already a little gassed. Another crucial point in this fight is that Menifield listens to his coaches really well during and between his fights. I have noticed that in pretty much all his fights, which makes me believe that he's smart and is going to learn from his loss in the last fight. Now, pointing out the obvious, he has cardio issues, and that if the fight goes past the first round, he might not be the same fighter and might be gun shy, which OSP can capitalize on. Another important point here is that Alonso sees his opportunities really well, but he hasn't created a lot himself. And considering the experience OSP has, he might not see a lot of obvious opportunities with the OSP. Now, OSP is himself a huge guy at light heavyweight, who is an all-round solid fighter, but off late has relied on his grappling more than his striking. He primarily fights in the southpaw stance and switches it fairly frequently. OSP is coming back from a one-fight stint at heavyweight, and probably got rocked in that fight with Ben Rothwell. OSP has, in the last 5 years, finished early only once. That was a submission by Ilir Latifi, a standing guillotine, which kind of gives me confidence that he can weather the storm, considering that he's faced some killers in the past, and the list includes John Jones, Dominic Reyes, Volkan Ozdemir, Corey Anderson, Shogun Rua, Glover Teixeira. It goes on. OSP's troubles start when he begins to gas out in the second or the third round, especially if he's wrestled. So in order to be effective, OSP will look to clinch up with Menifield, tire his arms out before trying to take him down in the second. Almost everyone hurts OSP initially. It's happened in pretty much all the fights, and you go watch the tape. But he's also shown the ability to recover a fair number of times, giving me confidence that he might be able to weather the storm. Now, to summarize, Alonzo will come out strong like he does. He might change a little bit too, and switch it up just to manage his energy. I think he will be able to hurt OSP. However, Alonzo would have learned from his mistake, and with OSP being the veteran that he is, he will ride out the first and majority of the second round to impose his will later. This is again a toss-up fight like many other fights on the card, but OSP coming in a slight underdog makes me think that he might just be a better bet here. I personally will put money on an OSP win and maybe a slight hedge on a Menifield knockout.
Now the main card. This is between Alester Overeem and Augusto Sakai. So Overeem is a wily veteran who's coming off of a TKO win against Walt Harris, where he was almost finished himself by brutal ground and pound. Overeem then came out of a terrible situation to actually finish Harris by ground and pound in the second round. In the fight prior to that, with Jairzinho Rosenstruck, which Alester was dominating over the majority of 5 rounds, he got a bomb of a right hook in the closing seconds. Now, Sakai doesn't really bring anything to the table that Overeem hasn't seen before. But Sakai does have the power and wiliness that Overeem needs to be careful of. Against powerful strikers, Overeem has started to mix his striking with takedowns and clinch game. Best example was actually Rosenstruck and Walt Harris. His wrestling defense has been improving ever since he fought with Curtis Blades, and after losing that fight, he joined the camp where Curtis Blade fights in Denver, Colorado. He probably can only be taken down by Stipe and Blades in the top 10 in the heavyweight division now that DC is retired. Overeem has a great ground and pound, which I'm sure would be his easiest path to victory. Of course, if Overeem is able to take Sakai down. If Overeem has trouble in taking Sakai down, then he'd probably look to hold him up against the cage to get him tired. Sakai's lone loss was to Czech Congo, and it was a total snooze fest where Congo held him against the cage for majority of the fight. Overeem will look to work in the clinch against the cage and try to take the fight to the mat whenever possible. Now, Overeem throws devastating knees in Muay Thai plum and uses the thigh plum to set up trip takedowns, as he did against Pavlovich. And I think that would be a really effective technique against Augusto Sakai. Overeem will look to keep his guard up at all times, just cover up like he usually does, and lets his opponent throw strikes and lets them burn their gas, and then comes back with his own attack. This is something that we've seen off of Overeem in the last few fights. Now, talking about Sakai, Sakai has lost some fat and gained muscle in the last few fights. He has a good cardio for such a big man. He usually tries to push the opponent back to the fence so he could throw combinations. Sakai has deceptively good cardio, as I mentioned, and has shown a fairly high-paced fight for a heavyweight. He switches stances and throws really good outside leg kicks and has fast combinations. Sakai usually works behind his kicks to start with. He would look to affect Overeem's mobility by leg kicking him early and often. He throws a really good stabbing push kick up the middle, and he masks them with round kicks to the body. Sakai doesn't try to initiate a ground game, and especially given Overeem's credentials, it is highly unlikely that he will try to take the fight down. Sakai has had Muay Thai experience for over 15 years, so his clinch game is expected to be pretty good. Sakai has been taken down in only one of his fights against Ivanov, when he caught Sakai's kick to drag him to the ground. He didn't seem to have a well thought out plan to stand up, even though it happened 30 seconds before the end of the round. So there's a question mark there. Sometimes, usually later in the fight, Sakai lazily throws front kicks and knees. Thus, if Overeem has worked on timing double leg takedowns, he could take Sakai down and ground and pound and get his ground and pound into play. Sakai also has a really good chin, so I don't see Overeem knocking him out on the feet. Now, in summary, if Overeem opens up with southpaw stance, Sakai's primary weapons will be the right body kick and inside low kick. If he opens in orthodox, Sakai would look to land outside kicks to hamper his movement. Overeem would look to keep his guard up at all times, work in the clinch against the cage, and try to take the fight to the mat whenever possible. Overeem would also look to capitalize by catching Sakai's kick to take him to the ground. Overeem gassed out in the 5th round against Rosenstruck and ended up getting knocked out in the 5th. So he would want to learn from that loss and not lose focus till the fight is done. He has also shown ability to come back from almost getting knocked out himself to get the finish later on in the Walt Harris fight. So I see Overeem working Sakai on the cage and getting takedowns when Sakai advances to close the distance, and winning by TKO or decision.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please comment, share, and like, and I'll see you next Thursday for the next card. Thank you.